And let us get started. Thank you all so very much for joining our quarterly Local to Global webinar on this International Workers' Day. Happy May Day and much gratitude to all workers and labor organizers. My name is Sofía Verónica Montez. I have been a legal fellow with Project South since 2023, and I will be your moderator for our discussion today, titled Global Solidarity in Action, Aligning Movements in a Time of Crisis. Today's webinar is part of our quarterly Connecting Local to Global Struggles series. The recording and the related materials will be shared at a later time. For some context, Project South was founded in 1986 in Atlanta, Georgia. Our work is rooted in the legacies of the Southern Freedom Movement and Black radical traditions of the U.S. South. Project South aims to connect the struggles of the U.S. South with those of the Global South to uplift Black, Brown, Muslim, and immigrant communities resisting state repression. Our framework views the movements for liberation across the world as necessarily connected. To that end, our role as a movement anchor marries our knowledge and the experiences we've developed at the local, regional, and transcontinental levels. Project South is a member of the African Network, where it facilitates movement exchanges in support of grassroots mobilization, promoting popular democracy across multiple African social movements. Our speaker, Serge, will speak more later on his work with the Lucha movement, also an African member based in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Moreover, Project South has written extensively about the connections tying the forces of repression at home and abroad, from the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange Program that trains Atlanta police police officers in the brutal tactics of the Israeli occupation forces, to the substantial financial and diplomatic support the Biden and Trump administrations provided to former President Rodrigo Duterte's healing campaign in the Philippines. Our speaker, Khury, will speak more later about this intersection between the Black struggle in the United States and the struggle for Palestinian liberation. And our speaker, Bernadette, will speak with us on her work with Bayan USA to uplift authentic democracy in the Philippines in the face of these Western imperial pressures. We rely on these international connections to inform our organizing in the US South, and we share our insights and experiences from our corner of the world with our partners across the world too, to help build a robust wealth of knowledge for community empowerment, particularly important in an age of rising fascism. As global capital enters into a period of crisis, it escalates its mechanisms to eliminate popular voices, calling for a truly equitable, human-centered global economy that serves all who have been dispossessed over centuries of colonial and neoliberal policies. The apartheid state of Israel is leading a genocide of the Palestinian people. The latest step in a Nakba that has been underway for 77 years. The Democratic Republic of Congo sees the worsening of unspeakable murders and the enforced disappearances of protesters. All the while, advocates continue voicing the human rights violations the country has suffered over its decades-long civil war between a militarized regime and various militia groups. Meanwhile, people's tribunals organized by social justice movements and organizations opened a forum for Filipinos who had family members extrajudicially executed by the Duterte and Marcos administrations. Duterte now sits at The Hague awaiting trial for his crimes against humanity, resulting in the murders of thousands to tens of thousands of people in deep poverty and political dissenters. But justice for the crimes of Marcos and the United States presidents backing his crimes remains pending. The US supports these oppressive regimes economically, politically, and militarily. At the same time, social movements based in the US are making stronger connections and organizing in solidarity with global liberation movements. Much discourse over the past several months and years has pondered over the seemingly dwindling grasp of US hegemony over the world stage. States the world over have partnered to establish networks of power independent of and opposite to Western state power. The question for us here today, 70 years after the Bandung Conference was held, representing more than half of the world's population standing up to the colonial and neo-colonial order, is how can people's movements rise to the occasion, to create a grassroots structure to secure and spread emancipatory power for all the peoples of the world. And so it is my absolute honor to get to welcome our speakers today. We have Serge Kambale, who is an activist and co-founder of the citizen movement Lucha, which stands for Lutte pour le changement, which means fight for the change, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He is responsible for training in the principle of luchology within this movement, which has led numerous actions and campaigns since 2012 to build a Congo where social justice and human dignity reign. Serge is a coach of social movements within the African Coaching Network, a member of the Global Activist Advisory Group for Amnesty International, and a member of Afriki, a collective of social movements for Africa and the diaspora. We also have Bernadette Ellorin, who is the coordinator and national spokesperson for Bayan USA, the US chapter of the Bagong Aliansang Bayan, or Bayan for short, who is an anti-imperialist and multi-sectoral alliance of workers, peasants, women, youth, church, indigenous peoples, and others struggling for national liberation and genuine democracy in the Philippines. Berna served for 10 years as a member of the International Coordinating Committee of the International League of People's Struggle, a global formation of social and national liberation movements fighting imperialism with a socialist perspective. Last but not least, we have Khury Peterson-Smith, who is the co-founder of Black for Palestine and the Michael Ratner Middle East Fellow and the co-director of the New Internationalism Project at the Institute for Policy Studies. Khury researches the US empire, borders, and migration, and strategizes with activists to work against the violence that the United States carries out and supports around the world. Khury focused specifically on US militarism in the Middle East and the Pacific, and movements that resisted. He graduated from the Clark University Graduate School of Geography in Massachusetts after completing a dissertation on US military bases in the Pacific. He is one of the co-authors and organizers of the 2003 Black Voices for Ceasefire statement, which was signed by over 6,000 Black activists, artists, and scholars. So thank you all so much for being here today. Let us start with a light question. How do you greet a good friend where you are from? And let us start with you, Serge.
Thank you so much. In my region, we talk Swahili, but if you see, and we have formal greetings, but if it is about a friend, a good friend, we can say poor. Just poor is, it's all.
Thank you so much for sharing. What about you, Berna?
If it's a comrade, you can say, depending on the time of day, magandang umaga, good morning, magandang hapon, good afternoon, or magandang gabi. But because it's International Workers' Day, I'll give a more militant greeting. I'll say, isang mainit na pagbati sa ating lahat, which means a warm militant greeting to all of us. Yeah.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. And Khury?
I love the greeting, what's good? What's good with you? Which is a great invitation to share what's good or what's going on. So that's a kind of universal greeting, and I'll say that the comradely greetings.
Heck yeah, thank you so very much. Now, moving on to the conversation proper. I wanted to ask each of you if you can tell us a little about how you've perceived the current political moment, both within your own national space and how that relates to the worldwide political movement. Let's start with you, Serge.
Thank you so much. I think in my country, the political moment today, we can summarize it by saying that extractivism is continuing. The extraction of resources continues in DRC. And when I talk about that, I remember that this week, China reported to have imported in 2014 mineral from Congo that worth 21 billion dollars only for that year. And if you ask yourself why, it's because in 2008, Congo signed a deal, a contract with China to grant, where we granted our cobalt and our copper deposit in exchange of the construction of infrastructures. We signed a contract of exploiting these minerals for 30 years. And I can tell you that because it was mineral, we would give them this mineral, and then in exchange for the construction of infrastructures. But I can tell you that today in Congo, we can't see those infrastructures. And since that time, we have been facing wars because some countries that were not happy, this is one explanation, but there are many other explanations. Some countries that were not happy with this deal between Congo and China found a way to also serve themselves in DRC. And what they did was to found some armed group, so that those armed group may control major mining sites, particularly in the east of Congo. And this is, and then they would control those mines and get mineral. For example, in 2013, a country like Rwanda, our neighbor, was the first producer or exporter of a mineral called cassiterite. But everyone agrees that all those minerals were coming from Congo, but they were not stopping there. Even the president of Rwanda, Kagame, said that no, those minerals were just transiting here in Rwanda, but they were going, and you know where they go. Then, actually, in my country, that is what is happening, the extractivism, and unfortunately, this is the consequences on the population. And you may know this information that nowadays Goma, which is my city where I come from, is invaded by the rebels that are backed by Rwanda, and they control actually Rubaya mine and other mines that are in our neighborhood. And when they entered, they killed at least 3,000 people. That is like at least, but other people are talking about 6,000 people killed in Goma. And we have many displaced people. I don't talk about children who were killed when they entered in Bukavu. I don't talk about our comrade Biamungu of Lucha, who was targeted by that armed group when they entered in another village called Kambale, and he was killed actually because he was targeted as being a member of Lucha, a movement that was trying to resist to that end group. And actually, that is what I can say. And also these days, unfortunately, the US has invited itself in the scene. Today, when I am talking, the president of Congo is now traveling to the US because they have agreed with the US government that they are going to give to the US 15 years of exploiting the copper and the lithium and the cobalt of Congo, and in exchange, the US is gonna help us militarily, and they are talking about the development. But we know that these bilateral investment treaties like this, like the one who will earn, who will gain is actually the US and not us. We know that this is like neocolonialism that's actually is taking place. And I will finish by saying that apart from the extractivism, there is also a problem with our government, like the people who are in charge of ruling the country. The political class is corrupted, and I can see this in many other countries, and they play a bad role in facilitating those who are plundering the country, and themselves are getting some benefit. And the example I can give is that an MP in Congo earns $21,000 per month, an MP, while a doctor and general practitioner like I am earns $480, and a teacher is in around $140. Then you can see that a small oligarchy is emerging, and that is exacerbating inequalities in my country. And that is what is happening. But if I talk about something that is a bit positive in the present political moment, because what I learned from Project South when I participated in the inter-movement in 2022 is that every time we need to analyze the moment, the political moment, by just analyzing how the exploitation is happening, but also how the resistance is happening. Then if I talk about the resistance, I can say that actually we can see since like 10 years how young people and citizens are becoming aware of their citizen power. And actually today, and I know that Brother Emery remember that today is our anniversary of Lucha. This is the 13th anniversary of Lucha, because the first action we did as Lucha, and that time we were not calling ourselves Lucha, but the movement that became Lucha. The first action took place on May 1st, 2012. Then, we are able to see that many of the young people are trying to grow that the awareness is growing, and not only in DRC, but also in Kenya, in Ghana, and elsewhere on the continent. We are able to see even in the diaspora how young people are mobilizing themselves against the dispossessed who are ruling our countries, and also against some manifestations of neocolonialism that we are living today. I think, I can say that for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for sharing, Serge. It is quite uplifting that the resistance movement is arising and developing in such a context, and it is absolutely daunting that this international scheme of extractivism has affected the intrinsic wealth of the Congolese nation so harshly. Let's move to Berna. If you can tell us, same question. What can you tell us about the current moment, both where you're from as well as how it connects to the international moment?
Yeah, thank you. How's my sound?
It sounds
Good.
wonderful.
Good. Um, sure. I mean, very similar to what Serge shared. The Philippines is in many ways um, a mining capital of Asia. In fact, where I'm from in Mindanao, it is the mining capital of the Philippines. So, like the forest where my family is gone. No, there are big open pits, there, and have so the nature has been destroyed, in favor of exporting our raw materials for cheap. No, so unfortunately, in terms of the political moment, there's a lot of talk right now about these tariffs that the Trump administration is imposing on different countries and how it's, I guess, inconveniencing consumers here in North America or in the United States with regards to inflation. That's a reality for the majority of the oppressed peoples in the world that have suffered from denied the right to development because of neocolonialism. So in the Philippines, it's May Day today. Happy May Day to all. But the peasants and the farmers and the rural sector in the Philippines are clamoring for an end to the import-dependent, export-oriented economy, which is the reality for so many countries. That is a result of neoliberal economic policies imposed by US-led imperialism all over the world, through trade. And so I think the disruption right now with these tariffs demonstrates the need for us to struggle globally for a new economic order. No, how development is established, how trade is established through equal agreements and not through onerous, lopsided agreements that condition smaller countries to become dependent, economies to become dependent on other economies. So, in the Philippines, we don't make anything. We have no basic industries. We have no, we don't make anything. What we create are semiconductors, which is a part, no? And our economy is so dependent on the export of these semiconductors, but we can't eat semiconductors. Semiconductors can't, they can't provide us with shelters, but that's our economy is based on these semiconductors and also services. Like we provide call center services, but again, like you cannot really subsist or develop as a nation under these type of conditions without basic industries that provide for the needs of the people. So I think that is not just in the Philippines. I think that's all over the global South, where we have economies that are essentially denied the right to develop. So I think that is under the core basis for imperialist war. Imperialist war, which is escalating now alongside fascism, is based on the ability for these bigger powers to plunder and cripple and deny smaller countries of development. It's very misleading to say these countries are poor. These countries are wealthy. They have all of the natural wealth of the world, but the people in these countries remain poor because they have been denied the right to develop their own natural wealth. Their natural wealth is being stolen or plundered, their land is being grabbed. And I think that's where we also have to raise our analysis and connect our disparate struggles, because there are global South peoples who are displaced and are forced to go to the North, to look for work because they can no longer live in their home countries. So in the Philippines, a big part of our population is exported systematically, and our remittances become what keeps our economy afloat. Unfortunately, in the absence of industrializing the agricultural sector, in the absence of basic industries, Filipinos are forced to leave in droves every day, and the government facilitates this. So, unfortunately, the current political moment, the Philippines remains since 1946, when we became a neocolony of the U.S., semi-feudal, semi-colonial country. Semi-feudal in that we are still dependent on agriculture as the base of our economy, but we are not allowed to develop our agricultural sector. It remains pre-industrial. We still use water buffalo to plow. We don't have any tractors to cultivate the land. And the majority of the people who cultivate the land cannot own the land. It is dominated by big despotic landlords, by foreign corporations, especially mining corporations that plunder, and are they also are protected by the Philippine state. Now, speaking directly to what Serge says about the corruption in the government that works in cahoots with foreign powers to and makes its own money off of the betraying its people. So and currently the Philippines is at the crosshairs of this well, it's not new, crosshairs of this growing military rivalry between the US and its allies and China and its allies. So we are literally at the crosshairs of this impending war campaign now between these two superpowers, and no one is going to protect the Philippines when this war happens. No one is going to protect the Philippines. Just have to protect themselves, you know. So we are at present, the Philippines remains for the past since 1899 strategic military outpost for the US. Meaning to say that we used to host the largest US permanent military bases outside of the US in Asia for the longest time. But the Filipino people struggled to have those bases shut down, and they were shut down in the early 90s. But US military presence remains in the Philippines. Actually, right now, as I speak, there are the Balikatan exercises, which are these annual exercises the US military conducts in the Philippines and the surrounding waters. But these military exercises have grown exponentially, and now it's not just the US. Other countries, Canada, Australia, and even NATO states like France and Sweden are also joining into this Indo-Pacific strategy to militarize the region because they're profiting from the war campaign over there. They are selling warships, they are selling missiles, they're selling fighter jets. And how does this affect the Filipino people? Bombs are being dropped on villages, you know, as testing grounds. So I can go on and on about what is wrong and how the US is continuing its counterinsurgency campaign in the Philippines, but I would rather use this time to talk about the resistance, which I think is more important to talk about. You could look up the history of the Philippines and the history of US imperialism in the Philippines, but you won't get that much about the history of the Filipino people's resistance, no? At present, you know, there is an armed revolutionary struggle in the Philippines that is fighting principally an agrarian revolution in the countryside. They are actually, and by agrarian revolution, I mean, that's a very broad term. At minimum, the peasants are fighting for lowering land campaigns, lowering of like land rents, of the price of seeds, the price of the price of the materials they need to the basic materials they need to cultivate the land because they have to pay for that themselves. But at the maximum, this means land occupation, especially occupation of land that has been abandoned by absentee landlords. So and also disrupting the operations of major mining corporations there. And this is a reality for the majority of the Filipino people in the country who live in the rural areas. You know, it's a war zone. It's a constant war zone. They wake up. It's a life and death struggle every day. And so that's their reality. And they're actually to survive, they have to join the movement to oppose these forces, right? So in the urban centers in the cities, you have campaigns. Just today, there was a major May Day demonstration in the Wasang Bonifacio in Manila. The Wasang Bonifacio is a big plaza. It's a big central transportation hub in the city of Manila, in the capital, where you have the you don't need a permit to demonstrate. And also there is a big statue of Andres Bonifacio, who is the founder of the Katipunan, or the first Philippine People's Army to fight the Spanish colonial powers when the Philippines was colonized by Spain, and then later continued to fight the U.S. imperial powers when the U.S. Invaded the Philippines in 1899. So the the Katipuneros continued to fight. Until this day, there is still an armed revolutionary struggle to fight foreign powers in the Philippines. So it's arguable, but I would say that the Philippine armed revolution was one of the longest, if not the longest, against U.S. imperialism in the world, especially in the East, in Asia. So the struggle now really is for national liberation, meaning to say, national liberation. We want genuine sovereignty. We want to build an economy that answers to the needs, that industrializes, first of all, number one, and also enacts um, land reform, meaning land back to the tillers, dismantling the big landlord system that dominates the Philippine government. The Philippine government is dominated by the big landlords who work in cahoots with corporations and foreign powers to ensure that the land is extracted, the land is plundered. And this comprador class is what we have to also target. And this comprador class exists all over the global south. They are in government in the global south. So we have to look at the states in the global south, who are the class that is in power, and really criticize and oppose them and expose them for what they do in cahoots to sustain U.S. imperialism and imperialism all over the world and manufacture poverty all over the world. In the urban centers, the Filipino people are organizing into different different sectorally and also regionally to oppose economic policies that are unequal, to oppose U.S. militarism, to also build their own media systems, public information systems that will get the word out to other people, not just in the Philippines, but all over the world. They're working hard to translate documents because the Philippines has over 100 languages, you know. So the peasants, the poorest of in the countryside, they don't read, they don't write, you know. So you have to work hard to translate information, basic documents about what's happening, so that they understand what is happening on a national scale, let alone a global scale. So organizing is hard. We all know this. Organizing is hard, but the task of translating, the task of writing, the task of organizing becomes painstaking, but also very fulfilling and very needed, especially if you continue to understand how all of our struggles are interlinked, you know. And as much as we focus very much on national liberation and strategy and tactics to liberate the Philippines, we also understand that we will not win. And even if we do win, those wins will be temporary if we do not also practice internationalism. So there is no contradiction between national liberation and internationalism as well. So we also know there are other countries that are engaging in similar struggles all over the world, especially all over Latin America, all over Africa, who have also been oppressed and exploited by imperialist powers. And we try our best to fundraise and work with them and go to these countries to also share our experiences and also bring them to our country to also share experiences. So it's a lot of fundraising, you know, practically speaking, it's a lot of fundraising. If we can use these tools of virtual tools for information sharing like Zoom or Signal or whatever, very good. But if we can meet in person, even better, you know, we can discuss these things in a more secure way. And I think that's so we take advantage of international conferences and gatherings that actually bring people together face to face in person to share strategies and tactics and also talk about the global world situation and the movements of the imperialist powers all over the world. I think it's important for us to for the Filipino people who are all very, very conscious that they are part of a bigger struggle all over the world, but there's nothing wrong with them focusing on their own liberation as well as having that consciousness. Yeah.
That was perfect. Thank you so much for sharing, Berna. And it is quite an impressive history that the Filipino people have persisted through so long. And I really love your point about how there's no poor countries. It is the matter of extractivism and this colonial order that subjects countries into dependency. And on that line, I wanted to shift to Khury and ask, what can we learn from previous movements for global solidarity, whether that be the non-aligned movement of the 50s and 60s, any other such movements. What's the good, what's the bad, what's the ugly of such past efforts to defeat colonialism?
That's a great question. Thank you, Sofía, and thank you all at Project South. The work you do every day, and particularly for this conversation. Well, what can we learn? I think that I think the start is the need. When I think about being located in this place called the United States, just the need for an orientation actually on the rest of the world, not only in terms of the impacts of U.S. imperialism, which Berna and Serge have described in great and rich detail, but also the histories and the kind of current realities of people resisting all over the world. Because the truth is, I think in the U.S., in many ways, we're so far behind actually in terms of our political situation. We have so much to learn. I think about all of the different experiments in social movements happening right now, the different electoral experiments that are happening elsewhere in the world now that feel very difficult to relate to. I feel, and I doubt I'm alone on this call, that U.S. electoral politics and kind of official politics feel, let's say, lacking. Let's say like wildly out of step. Not only with public opinion, but certainly with what the planet needs and what people needs. And elsewhere in the world, people are launching all kinds of experiments. I think in particular about recent efforts in Ecuador of indigenous political organizing and political like electoral parties, electoral formations that are bringing a kind of anti-extractivism into the mainstream, which feels so far ahead of what we're doing here in the US. So that's the first thing, is just that orientation. And when I think about, just to go to the question Sofía asked about different efforts, kind of transnational, internationalist efforts to forge solidarity and really to move in a different direction, not only in different local and national struggles, but globally to move in a different direction. There's such an incredibly rich history. And I'll just say a word about things in the 20th century in particular, where on one hand, I feel like the 20th century was unfortunately the triumph of the nation state, this idea that the only kind of political category that we have is this entity with borders and a flag and a military and its police and its national government and its national identity, which gets deployed against so-called minorities, and that is a reality that exists all over the world, And this nation state thing, it started in Europe and the United States, and that was really, there was a kind of big ascendancy in the early 20th century to kind of establish that nation state form. And I think in particular, by the end of the 20th century, after a wave of decolonization, of independence, unfortunately, the nation state kind of was able to capture a lot of the decolonizing world. And, Berna, again, described it so eloquently and a bit painfully, how a country like the Philippines goes from a formal colonial relationship to a neo-colonial relationship, an abusive relationship with a place like the United States and other extractive powers. But it didn't have to go that way. And I think that's that for me is what I hold on to and what feels so important. And so you think about experiments like there's this conference called at Bandung in Indonesia, which happened in 1955. And this was a kind of gathering of peoples of Africa and Asia and Latin America to talk about a different set of possibilities, and I have been reading, and I recommend the work of Richard Wright, the great Black American writer. He actually went to the Bandung conference and he wrote these dispatches from it. And I was reading, one of his journalistic accounts, and he starts actually before getting to Bandung. He's talking to his wife. He's reading a newspaper, and he sees there's going to be this conference in Indonesia, bringing together people of what's then called the Third World. And he says to his wife, "I've got to go." And she says, "Who's going to be there?" And he said, "Everybody's going to be there." And she says, "What's going to come out of it?" And he says, "I don't know what's going to come out of it, but I've got to go." And on one hand, that conference, it brought together these social movements, these movement leaders, these leaders of national liberation struggles around the world. And it also brought together these newly independent states, that were trying to find their footing. Some of those, I think, if we look at the kind of long arc from 1955 to now, in the direction of some of those states, a lot of those states, I think it's been pretty unfortunate. In India, the newly independent Indian state played, they had a presence at Bandung. This is a state, a country that was colonized by Britain for so long, and achieved its independence in 1947. Today, the Indian state is one of the leaders of world fascism, in the Modi regime. So there's a kind of unhappy ending, but I think it's useful to go back to that moment of possibility in 1955 and think about the kind of dreams that folks had. Think about not only what was lost, but go back to the set of possibilities. Similarly, there was this effort called the non-aligned movement, which actually was kind of convened by Yugoslavia, in the second world, not the third world, but the second world. And again, the idea was, look, the world has been divided between Moscow and Washington, between the Soviet Union and the United States, these two great superpowers. What would it mean to have the countries of the world moving and kind of coordinating with each other in a way that is not aligned with either of these great powers, but actually seeking something different, seeking a third path? Again, I think that the kind of this notion that the only way that you could have a seat at the global table is if you have a state has really, it's been really limiting. And I think that it has been limiting for experiments like the non-aligned movement. But once again, it didn't have to go that way. And I will, I'll kind of end with a recommendation. And then I'll end with this chapter of history that I really love. Recommendation is this book called World Making After Empire by a scholar named Adam Getachew. And she's writing about efforts in Anglophone Africa and the Black Caribbean to use the new independence, of these newly independent countries to actually try to get beyond this nation state form that was piloted in the West, So there were these experiments in Africa that said, what if we actually form a country, that doesn't have national borders? When part of the Ghanaian constitution was, we would like to enter into a kind of pan-African arrangement, and we're willing to surrender our national borders if we can get there. It's fascinating. There were these efforts led in the Black Anglophone Caribbean to pursue a different economic order, actually, that was not based on a kind of extractive and exploitative trade. And there were experiments with, what if we actually surrendered or gave up our national currencies in favor of transnational currencies, right? So we could have a different kind of economic formation. So I really, really recommend this book, World Making After Empire. Again, we know the story, the story kind of played out differently, but every nation state tries to, they offer their own kind of narrative that looks at its history as the fulfillment of what we have now. Like looks at what we have now and says, oh yeah, it was always supposed to be that way. And actually it didn't have to go this way. There was a much more expansive set of visions around the time of decolonization and independence. What I will end on is this thought, again, thinking about different kind of political forms and ways of forging relationships across borders. I'm thinking about the fact that the Black Panther Party, this radical Black party based in the U.S. that folks will be familiar with, that they had a foreign office in Algeria. And part of the idea was, again, the African continent at this time is this site of decolonization. All of these people who were leaders in the Black Power movement and civil rights movement actually saw themselves as part of a global effort decolonization. I mean, Martin Luther King writes about this in a letter from Birmingham jail. He sees what's happening in Birmingham, Alabama as part of what's happening in Africa and Asia and Latin America. And that kind of thing has been stolen from us. And I think that this history of the Black Panthers having an office in Algeria, where they are, and it's located in, what we in the US call Embassy Row, in Washington, where all the different embassies are of these kind of newly independent African countries, other social movements. They all have these buildings in Algiers. And so, people talk about the experience of going, to have a set of conversations at the Black Panther Party office, and then moving on to the different embassies of these newly independent African nations. And this was also this kind of moment of possibility where different radical and decolonizing movements were thinking about not only how they can learn from each other, but what would it mean to move together globally in a certain liberated direction.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Khury. Now, mindful of the fact we only have 9 minutes left, I want to shift back to Serge and ask your impression of how can we build a sustainable and effective global alignment and solidarity today, looking ahead to the next 20 years, something that, mindful of the actual living human beings who are the organizers on the ground, something that is sustainable for everyone individually and everyone collectively.
Thank you so much. And I'm very inspired by the comrade who have just showed that, yeah, we can be in different spaces, but still face the same problems. And that is why I think the biggest lesson that we have learned and what can help us to build a vision that will be the vision of this century is just unite. And I remember this sentence that says that many small people or many small groups doing many small actions in many different places can change the world. And I think that this is true only if we as movement engage in organizing. And Bernard said it very well. We need to make sure that in our movement and all the activists together, we may focus on the importance of organizing, because the main thing that we are seeing, for example, in the African continent is that, yes, young people are there, they are mobilizing themselves, but the work of organizing is not as clear as we need to have it, so that we may know that what we are doing is a long-term action. If you go, for example, today in Kenya and ask about the Gen Z movement that took place some months ago, then you will see that it was just a momentum, but the work of organizing is not yet seen. Then for me, I think that is the biggest thing we need to do. The other one is even some actions. We need to be intentional in having actions in that we are doing, let's say, together in terms of supporting each other, because the actions and the voices that comes at the same moment from Latin America, from the US, from Africa, from I don't know where, that can amplify the effect of our action. And also, Khury talked about the international solidarity. I think this is very key. And when I try to see how even my country in the independence time had someone like Lumumba, is very, very important to understand that Lumumba actually was influenced by Mwalimu Nyerere and Kwame Nkrumah. Mwalimu Nyerere from Tanzania and Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana, and all the other people from the group. And if you understand that Nkrumah was linked, he was participating in the assembly, the People Assembly with the Du Bois and so on, then you see that actually as the people who are facing this exploitation, we need to make sure that we are linked, because our fate is linked. Then we need also to make sure that we are linked. And I remember even, and I read the article that Emery sent me about Malcolm X and Buba in Tanzania. Then, yeah, every time. And today, actually, I'm grateful because some of our activists who are persecuted in Congo, they are now hosted by activists from Tanzania. I think this is what I call international solidarity on action, and we have been supported by many groups from Africa, the Project South, and like we can see that it is taking place. But once again, yeah, I plead that we may focus on organizing, and why not organize today the People Assembly? Because for me, I think the present moment is the favorable moment. We are seeing how in Latin America, I know today activists from Latin America, I know many activists in Africa, in the US, in Asia, in Europe. I think there are some important moments or momentum in the history. And if we lose this opportunity, we don't know what is going to happen in times that are coming. And something that I forgot to say about the face of neocolonialism is like the militarization of our continent. You know that France was in the west of Africa, and they were outside today. But the US, when I talked about the deal that they are making with our government, the main thing they said that they are going to do is to support Congo military. And we know the effect of those military bases. Militarization, as Khury said it, deny us the right to development, because I've never seen a country that is developing itself by guns. Then if we don't take this time to learn, to envision, to learn, and to organize, I don't know if there will be such momentum will happen in the 10 and the 20 years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Serge. That was extremely grounding. We are reaching the end. We have 1 minute left. So I just wanted to ask our speakers if you have maybe a sentence or two closing thoughts that you wanted to share before we close. Let's go with Bernadette first.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, it is International Workers' Day, and we talk about building collective power all over the world. I think it's important to also, when we emphasize organizing, we have to build organizations. We have to recruit into organizations, because I think organizations are so much more powerful when we act collectively than if we're acting by ourselves individually. This might an unpopular opinion. It is an opinion. I think a lot of us do put more emphasis and premium on individual leaders, individual writers, individual academics. But we won't build power on the ground if we don't have organizations, collectives, organizations that support each other in these really hard times of fascism. It's very easy to be intimidated. It's very easy to be harassed. It's very easy to be burnt out in these times. But if we have a collective, we support each other through these crisis times. So I want to emphasize the importance of organizations as the building blocks of movement building.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Khury?
Yeah, so right on. I'll just say we live in a time of crises, like many crises, and crisis leads, there's something kind of narrowing about a crisis because you're compelled to respond directly to the immediate crisis. That's extremely important, but this has to be a time, yes, of response, yes, of getting organized, but also of envisioning actually something entirely different. And that space is stolen from us. You know what I mean? Like we have to assert it. And it has to be a profoundly collective project. I mean, I completely agree with Berna, collectivity at every level, including globally. That takes time. It's complicated for all the reasons Berna said, but it's something that we have to do, because if we're not thinking about the big picture, the dominant forces are, and we can respond to the immediate crisis, but lose the big picture. And as Serge said, this is a moment where we have a huge opportunity, actually, and we don't want to surrender it.
Excellent, thank you. And Serge?
Yeah, I think I will take it from what Khury said. I think we need to let our history, the history of exploitation and the history of resistance, help us to dream our future, to plan it. And actually this pass through political education or popular education. For me, I think that is what is gonna help us to do what we are supposed to do, because I consider all this journey as a very long journey. I am, yes, ambitious, but not too much to think that we are gonna end this sophisticated system of imperialism today. But I think that if we do what we need to do, what we are expected to do as the generation of today, then we are sure that the next generation is gonna do also something important. And another thing is actually we have been talking about the struggle, like we talk about the fight, about the activism, about movement, but I think that we don't talk much about the activists or the member of the movement at an individual level. Reason why I can tell you that, this problem of well-being of activists, the individual well-being, is actually something that is key, because we can plan actions, we can plan many things, but all those things that we are planning are gonna be put in motion by people. Then we need to also think about those people, about their well-being. And this is something, even the term activists, to call yourself activists, come with a sort of a sense of strength. We actually hold the burden of our societies, of our planet, but our burdens of as people, as we need to think about them. I have seen activists who went into stress, into burnout, even some into trauma. And I need that our movement may help to tackle that problem, so that we may know that, people are healthy, psychologically and socially. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank all of y'all. Thank you also to Azadeh and Emery for supporting the webinar today. And thank you to every one of y'all that tuned in today. This was such a wonderful discussion, and I am so honored that we got to have this space today. We will be sharing the recording and resources after this, so stay tuned for that. And without further ado, that is it. So thank you again so very much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Sofía. Thanks for everybody to join.
Happy International Workers' Day.
Thank you and bye bye.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.